Springfield Armory released a new 4-inch version of their SA-35 modernized high-power clone, and we'll take a look at the history, how it informs the design of the gun and the gun itself, and how the design stands up in a modern context. Welcome back, gents. I'm David, and this is the Springfield Armory SA-35 4-inch, which they did send in for video, but that doesn't mean anything changes. I'm going to tell you about the gun, and you can draw your own conclusions. If it's not your first video, consider subscribing, and if you think you are, always check, because who knows? So the high power, which the SA-35 is a modern sort of reimagining of, is the follow-on to the 1911 design by John Moses Browning, although he wasn't around to see it in production. But what Browning drew was eventually the P-35 or GP-35. And if you're a history guy, you know that this is one of the few firearms that was issued on both sides of World War II, which is kind of an interesting statistic. Since then, it's been in a ton of military and police holsters around the world. It is kind of storied. However, this isn't really covered much in a modern context. Sort of in the age of the striker pistol, you don't hear much about high power other than kind of nostalgia stuff. And this is sort of a updated version of a nostalgia build for a high power. And I bring all of that up because you have to consider how people were being taught how to shoot these guns back in the day because of how the design choices sort of play out. So military marksmanship manuals of the time instructed people to shoot pistols with simply one hand because it's a handgun, not a hands gun. And the ergonomics for a handgun with just one hand on it are absolutely brilliant, but marksmanship manuals have come a long way, and now we put two hands on the pistol, and some of the design stuff sort of gets in the way of shooting in a modern context. You know how I always cry about YouTube? Well, let me tell you about We The Free. We The Free is your all-in-one home for firearms content built for gun owners by gun owners. Watch your favorite creators alongside exclusive originals, full training courses, master classes, and podcasts you just won't find anywhere else. You can connect inside an active community where members share content, compete, and win giveaways. They've already given away 5 really awesome things that you're just not allowed to give away on YouTube, all to its subscribers. We The Free is your one-stop shop for firearms freedom. There are monthly and annual plans available, and they are super reasonably priced. And if you buy an annual plan, it is 50% off, about $8.99 a month and $59.99 a year respectively. Thanks to We The Free for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. Before we get there, let's talk about how the actual design itself was modernized as the SA-35. The sights, first and foremost, are a very usable set of a white dot front, blacked out rear, sort of almost target set of sights, which look great. There's no magazine disconnect, which was a feature in the original design, and as such, the trigger brake has been cleaned up quite a bit, and I believe the pull weight from the historical examples is down quite a bit. It's a blued slide-in frame with walnut checkered grips. It does ship with 15-round magazine. The original high-power magazines were only 13 rounds, but they're still flush length, and they are 15 rounds now. But the 4-inch version of the gun only weighs about 31 ounces, so it's just outside the realm of a polymer striker gun, but at the same time, it's got the wood and steel sort of look and aesthetic. So where does that put the gun in a modern context, shooting with 2 hands on the gun? Now, this is going to be my experience with the gun. I've got size XL hands. I am 6'4", so I am got more hands than this gun has grip, because the high power has always been a gun that is favored by smaller handed shooters because it is a nicer reach to the trigger. It's just not as big as like the 1911 or, you know, now 2011s. So first and foremost, one issue I run into on this pistol is the safety design, which is only on the left side of the pistol. The safety is intended to be clicked off with basically the knuckle of your thumb right there on the inside. That's where the safety sort of falls, but it also rides pretty low. And because it rides pretty low, what ends up happening, because I have a big fat thumb, is my thumb is in conflict with my support hand trying to get onto the gun. My thumb is pushing my hand down and to the front. And why is that bad? Well, 2 things. The support hand does 2 things. It provides additional clamping force onto the pistol so you can use less grip out of your dominant hand, but also the palm of your hand resists the rotation of the pistol through traction on kind of the heel of your thumb. And because of how my thumb sits on the safety, I can't get my hand into the optimum place to contribute to recoil management out of the gun. So all my support hand is doing is providing additional clamping force because the gun isn't really being stabilized by my support hand. Now, I can take my thumb off the manual safety, which I don't like to do for single action pistols, because what can happen is you can accidentally bump the safety on and recoil and choke the gun. But if I take my thumb off the safety and just kind of put it on my hand like that, I can get a better grip and shoot the gun better, but at the same time, that's not a great technique. This is another small one, but a lot of modern gun handling is racking the gun from the front of the slide in front of the ejection port. It's just a little bit faster to build grip rather than kind of coming to the rear and slingshotting. Because of the slide stop and how it's built up right there, you basically can't run the gun from the front of the slide. That's just kind of a design quirk with the pistol. Another thing is if you look at this area of the pistol, it's kind of pushes out in a way that it isn't strictly necessary, but it kind of forces your fingers away from the pistol. It doesn't seat as deeply into the hand as you want it to. If you compare it to like a CZ-75, which you could argue has design inspiration from the high power as far as how it looks, you can see that, you know, that there's relief under the trigger guard where the gun just feels like it gets in the hand better. And you can then look at the safety on the CZ-75. It's actuated with the tip of the thumb, so if you're on the manual safety like you are, you've got a nice pocket for your support hand. Your support hand can get nice and high on the gun, and you know, you can contribute meaningfully to recoil management from your support hand. We'll get into that in the shooting bit. The magazines are interesting as well. If you look at the magazine funnel on the gun, which is kind of a bullet shape on the gun, but if you look at the top of the magazine, it is actually kind of a square. The front has two metal edges. So if you're just trying to throw the magazine into the gun, what can end up happening is the steel magazine on the steel grip can actually bind on the gun. You've got to be perfect in getting it oriented. So the way that I found to get it to seat more reliably, trying to do it at speed, is if you're to marry up the flat part at the back of the magazine to the back of the pistol frame, and it's easy to get it to go in. But if you try and, you know, index off the front like we all do when we're doing these high-speed reloads, these two square bits at the front of the magazine can bind in the grip. Now, I like the look of the walnut grips. The checkering is actually quite good. It's better than probably most polymer gun textures, but it is a nostalgia play if you wanted to update it for more texture, or like palm swells from G10. LOK Grips actually makes grips for these guns as well, so that capability exists, but I do like the look and kind of feel of this, although I would prefer more aggressive texture. Now the trigger, this is kind of a weird one, because the trigger, if you just get on the wall, there's very little take up. You're on the wall, you pull the trigger, and they're very little short throw until the slide cycles. Watch what happens to my finger keeping the trigger pinned. It goes even further back. So on the reset, your finger has to travel further forward, and the reset doesn't really like push your finger forward at all. There's a very kind of like softly audible click to it, but when you've got Hearing Pro and you can't even hear it. But it's just kind of a weird trigger because it feels very short when you pull it, but then you have to let it sort of all the way out to let the trigger reset. And as a result, I was getting into sort of trigger freeze when I was trying to shoot the gun quickly. Short stroke. Let's go silly. Now that's a training issue on me. Understanding that, I could absolutely learn how to run the gun quickly, but at the same time, it's just sort of not like most of the triggers you're probably used to pulling. So how does the gun compare to other more modern versions of a pistol? And we'll start with the CZ-75. CZ-75 is just a little bit heavier, but because of the ergonomics that allow your left hand to meaningfully control recoil better, the CZ feels more controllable. And if you look at the slow motion picture, look at my support hand, you can see on the CZ that my support hand moves with the gun. So I'm taking the energy off the gun, sort of rotating and putting it into the ground. When you look at it with the SA-35, my support hand is not moving with the gun. It's sort of decoupled from the gun. So all I'm getting is that clamping force. I took it out with the Springfield Armory Prodigy Commander, the 4 1/4 version of the gun as well, which is an updated version of the 1911, and what you would expect is probably true. I mean, I've got big hands, so I felt right at home on the Prodigy, which is a very soft shooting gun in its own right. The slow motion really shows that, where the Prodigy looks a lot slower, but the Prodigy weighs a lot more. The Prodigy is significantly heavier with a bull barrel and a sort of a heavier profile slide. And just for giggles, because somebody asked me in a comment last week on the channel to compare it to the Kimber KDS-9C, so I did that too, because I guess they're sort of the same size and sort of the same use case in mind. The KDS-9C is an aluminum framed gun, but the controls are a more modern sort of appointment than the SA-35. And as a result, the SA-35 actually was softer to shoot because of steel, but at the same time, the KDS-9 was a little bit more comfortable. My support hand felt more in control of the gun when I was shooting it. And at this point, you're like, this dude absolutely hates this gun. I absolutely do not hate this gun. I rather like it. I like it for the nostalgia play that it is. I like the blued and walnut look to the gun, and it actually shoots pretty decently. It's just that, you know, it is a handgun intended to be shot with one hand. And, you know, I'm a modern shooter, so it felt appropriate to kind of run through those things, because high power is one of those things, as I mentioned, that isn't really discussed in sort of modern circles, which is a shame because it is a cool pistol. I think the size and weight for this pistol make it a killer contender for a carry gun. It's roughly the size of a Glock 19, and as a result, I did shoot some HSTs through it and it ran them no problem. So I think it would make a really cool carry gun, especially at this side. I can't help but want to see the gun modernized even further, more relief under the trigger guard, redesigned sort of high ride safeties that allow my support hand to get onto the pistol. Forward cocking serrations are probably a bridge too far. Maybe trimming down the slide release so that, you know, modern manipulation becomes a thing. And dudes in the comments are like, you're supposed to slingshot the gun. It's like, yes, but there are hundreds of grandmasters who say otherwise, and many examples of people doing it successfully. Figuring out some sort of optics cut, even if it's just an RMSC, would be awesome. But I mean, the guns are cool. They're a great size and weight. And like I mentioned, if you've got small hands, this gun is probably brilliant for that. I let my 15-year-old shoot it on the range with me, and he absolutely loved the gun. He thought it was a really cool sort of retro looking gun, and the vibe of it is absolutely that. But I had never really spent much time on high power, so I felt like going through sort of the history of the pistol a little bit and how it stands up in a modern context was somewhat appropriate, because it is a cool gun, but you know what you're getting into. As always, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.